We have a clear path to fulfill our mission in Afghanistan while delivering justice to al-Qaeda. This future is only within reach because of our men and women in uniform. This time of war began in Afghanistan, and this is where it will end. With faith in each other and our eyes fixed on the future, let us finish the work at hand and forge a just and lasting peace.
Welcome back. And of course, that was the president yesterday in Afghanistan talking about the future of not only that country, but our military involvement there. Let me bring in our panel now, and we'll bring you at home into our conversation as well. Dominic Carter, of course, political journalist and author, senior political correspondent Andrew Whitman, and Lieutenant Colonel Mark Rosen, veteran of the war in Afghanistan, as well as assistant professor at West Point. And he recently completed a tour in Afghanistan, serving in the headquarters of General Petraeus. Welcome all. Thank you. Explain, if you could, what last night really meant from a policy standpoint, because there seems to be unanimity that Karzai, a sketchy figure, might be putting it politely. We don't know, but at the same end, it seemed open-ended, or at least depending on how you wanted to interpret what the president said, we were either going to be there for a while or it was time for the Afghanis to start, fighting for their own homeland.
I actually think from a policy perspective, this is great news, because we have established that we will be there for the long term, not with fighting and a large military force, but that we have their back, and we're going to be there with economic support, with aid, training support. This is terrific. This is strategic partnership. We should have stated that 2 years ago, but it's good policy now.
Colonel, the part that I'm still unclear on is, I get the role as you define it as a president, laid it out. But what happens if we say, in Kandahar, all of a sudden, there's a buildup here of Taliban, not only sympathizers, but even al-Qaeda elements? Are we still in the support business, or do we then say, okay, now we're going to take offensive action to break up what could be a national security threat to the U.S.? Does our role change depending on circumstances?
Well, that's why when the president said 3 years ago we're going to get out at time certain, that was a fundamental strategic error. Because we don't know, and we have to build our strategy around the circumstances on the ground. We don't know. And what we need to do is address the threat at the time. If we had done this right, we would have greater capabilities now, and our ability to transition out would be more certain. There is no 100% certainty of success, and there could be ups and downs. In fact, there will be ups and downs. We'll deal with that. The good news is we've helped build roughly 300,000 with our partners, Afghan National Army forces.
How trustworthy do our troops on the ground really look at those 300,000, both in terms of capability and in terms of really loyalty to mission and not enemy?
I got to tell you, the Afghan Army and police forces that have been built over the last few years have been doing the heavy lifting. This stuff does not get the media attention it deserves, but they're the ones out there doing the fighting. And we've got their back, and we're helping them logistically, air cover, but they're out there doing the raids and the missions and succeeding day in and day out. It gets no media coverage. It's a wonderful thing. Is there a 100% certainty of success? Absolutely not. But if we can stay the course through the end of 2014, as per our strategy, there's a possibility that we can pull this off. It's not a certainty.
Let me bring you guys in. I want to do it in the context of where the public pulse is on this. We'll get to the politics next segment, but let's do some of the policy. And if I could, guys, I want to just get into, in sequential order, those three graphics where we can really show where, from a polling standpoint, Americans feel about this. And the first question they were asked is whether they approve or disapprove of us coming home, U.S. troops being withdrawn from Afghanistan, and more than 3/4 of respondents approved of that, in this poll taking place just last week. The next poll, and that coming from Fox News, the next poll as to whether or not it's been stabilized. Should we keep troops in Afghanistan until the situation is stabilized, or remove troops as soon as possible? And again, this from earlier in the month of April. About a third say keep them until stabilized, while 3 and 5 say remove them as soon as possible. And finally, if you just look, and I don't have to say this to you, Colonel, you know this from firsthand, you can put faces, to more than just the names to these, but what we've already sacrificed, as a country here for the country of Afghanistan. We've lost more than 1,800 soldiers, more than 15,000 have been wounded. That doesn't even count all of the soldiers who are dealing with issues upon reintegration in civilian life with post-traumatic stress disorder, et cetera, and the number of both casualties, and then also the price tag of the war. And that was discussed both yesterday, Andrew, and again today. There is going to be a savings here, and it's estimated between $100 and $120 billion a year we put towards Afghanistan. The number doesn't become zero, but the number certainly comes down.
That's not even the number that the savings that jumps out at me the most. The savings that jumps out at me are the U.S. casualties, the U.S. killed in combat, and all the numbers that didn't appear on that graphic, the people who are going to have PTSD issues when they get home. But also, we saw the number 32% said stay until Afghanistan is stabilized. My biggest concern is that I don't think it will ever be stabilized. Historically, it's never been stable. It's the graveyard of empires. It hasn't had a functioning, formalized government since I don't know when. And we seem to think
Colonel,
that we can...
that's what some people say. 2014, 2024, 2034. It doesn't matter. At some point, it's going to go back to what the Soviets learned the hard way, what Alexander the Great learned. It doesn't matter who was in there. This is where, missions go to die, unfortunately.